Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita FINLEY.
People know that I do a lot of interviewing of authors. I do a lot of book reviews in Boomer Times, and it's really one of my favorite things. I've often thought of actually having a whole magazine of just books and people who are over 50 and what they've accomplished, because it's not easy when people get a book published. But so today we're going to have something a little different. Monty Helfgott, who you've heard before, he is a distinguished writer, but he also does more than that. He has groups that he helps to write memoirs. He helps them with their writing. And I had the pleasure of meeting Rebecca Barber not too long ago, because she really has something unique. It isn't just being an author. It's going back on someone's life and finding out about a mother who went and did things that were unbelievable. And so Rebecca now is recreating a life in a sense. And I'm so happy that you're here with us too. So I'm going to put everybody on Facebook Live so that people can see, trying to connect. And I don't know why. Oh, there it goes. Now it's around. Okay. So you just ignore that. We're just going to talk. I just want people who want to get on Facebook Live to get to know you a little bit better. Monty, let's start with you because you're responsible for all this. I met you because you were this great author, and you decided that we were going to do a book review of your terrific book. And why don't you start off telling a little bit about your books, because you have written 3, and then you are probably doing some other things because you always do. But why don't we start off with you first?
Okay, thank you, Anita. It's always a pleasure to be here with you in the studio, and I guess my author,
right,
is Rebecca
Yes.
Barber. And about 5 years ago, I started writing what I call my trilogy, which is called The Silence, and it's a story of a family with a long dynasty stretching back to, let's call it the old country of Poland, that they don't really know who they are. It's sort of a hidden dynasty, and it starts off in New York City with John Mackenzie, who is
my it's like my 007
It's
guy.
a 007. He's a combination of Indiana Jones and James Bond. He's about 6'5", very good looking, with long blonde hair, and he has a huge office space in Rockefeller Center, and he's a multimillionaire. He's a gemologist, and he is quite a humanitarian who travels around the world helping people in poorer countries who work in the various gold mines and silver mines and gems. And he's very emphatic that they have to be treated well. Well, anyway, he's back in New York City, and he comes in contact with a archaeological relic that begins to change his life, that he was presented with at the Museum of Judaic History. And then he goes on a worldwide tour to find out who he really is. And he's able to do some time travel. So the genre is paranormal historical thriller. After this book 1, we go back about 60 or 70 years to his grandfather, who is a rabbi in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And we find out about his life and what life was like growing up in a small town in Poland. And then the third part, or book 3, is really...
You haven't named the books.
The name of the book is called The Silence. The Silence. And why is it called The Silence? Good question. Okay, and the question is, because there are many kinds of silence. And one of the silences involved with this book is that they don't know who they are because there are hidden secrets. And that's what
But you know,
what it's
Monty,
about.
I have to say that when you're talking about these people, it's as though they're real. They're not real. You've made these people up.
You never know. You never know.
But that's what makes you such a good
mystical.
author. Yeah, but you see, you're very good at character development, and that's what makes the difference. And I see these people, and I had to make everyone know, no, they're not really there, living there, but
But you see, with my background as a psychologist, I'm able to bring in the emotional side, the strengths and weaknesses of human beings. That's what makes the character most inviting and able to connect with the readers.
Okay, so now your friend and co-author, Rebecca Barber, whom is sitting here with us, and she has something a little different to tell because hers are not made up. Her book is not made up, and that's what makes it very special. So, Rebecca, tell us about your book a little bit.
When I was very young, I discovered in my mother's night table drawer 2 small German-written books, later to find out that they were diaries. They had dates. Never did my mother speak of them, and in those days, you really didn't ask. So when she passed away, I waited an unduly long amount of time, 10 years, until I found just the right rabbi, chaplain, scholar to translate. And from that, I discovered that my mother at 19, 20, and 21 was absolutely one of the most inventive, creative, skillful teenagers you ever could meet. She was able to get her family from Düsseldorf to Lisbon over the course of a year and 3/4, very perilous journey. And we have since discovered that the Consul General of Portugal at the time, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, who could very well rival and surpass Schindler's good deeds because he saved 30,000 refugees, amongst them Jews, but also political asylum gypsies, people that they called politically undesirable, by writing visas in Bordeaux for them to cross over Spain to approach Portugal. And the foundation was able to categorically say that my mother was one of those people that were saved by the documents I had and by the entries in her diary.
So, Rebecca, how long from the first time that you thought there was something there is it? How many is it? A lot of years?
It's actually too many years, because now looking back, I could have compressed it, but I was afraid. Who was this woman? What was my mother really? I had no idea if I was finding a Matahari or a subversive. What was she? So it took about 30 years for me to pull myself together, have it translated, edited, do some historical research, and bound it, self-published myself. But a lot has happened since then, since I have met Monty Helfgott.
I'm sure. I think we all, once we meet Monty, he makes us rise to the occasion.
That's right.
Yeah, he's quite an interesting.
Well, that's
gentleman.
my mission. My mission
it is your
is
mission.
to preserve history, and Rebecca and her mother has a wonderful history that needs to be told.
Yes, because a lot of authors, they don't have history. They have other kinds of things to tell. I was just sharing with them before that we have a book we will be reviewing for our May issue about someone who had to care for 8 different family members at different times, and amazing stories. But we all learn as we read. Hopefully the book is good enough that it keeps us interested, and we all learn from books. So I know that you have I don't mean to say, it's not negative, a stable of people. A stable of people out there at Valencia, Valencia Point, I believe it is?
Yes, Valencia Point. Yeah, I created writing groups, and the first one started in the fall, and the second one started right after the new year, and I'm almost done. It goes about 3 months, and there are about 25 sessions. And there are some of the most unbelievably interesting stories. Of course, Rebecca's is the most interesting.
What is unique? She has a unique story.
She has a unique story, but there are also people who are former CIA operatives. There are people who were in World War II. I have a gentleman who's 96 years old who was a bombardier navigator on a B-24 or B-25 during World War II. I have someone who was an art restorer. She and her husband restored very famous pieces of art, including pictures or paintings that were owned by Ernest Hemingway and Marc Chagall's collection that Kirk Douglas has. And she and her husband worked on that constantly over a period of about 40 years. They've done some unbelievable restoration.
Will that be in their memoir? They're not
They
writing a
will
book.
definitely
That's not
be
a book, right?
No, I'm hoping that everyone who writes their memoir can turn it into a book, and I'll show them how to do it, whether it's self-published or published through a publishing house. But that's something that is let's call it a thrill that an author has when you have it in your hands and you see the beautiful cover and all your work has been infused into this book.
So, Rebecca, now I know you're listening very intently. And,
Yes, I am.
And I just, before you say what you're going to say, I wanted to ask you a question. When you were now a young mother and a young, wife, did you ever think that you'd be now at your age, it's a young age, but if you're out there making speeches to groups, was that something you thought you were determined to do?
Well, the interesting thing is that when my son, who's now in his 40s, was in an AP history class, and I just had the diaries translated and had very little information, but enough to wow 17-year-olds. I did speak in suburban Maryland, but nothing compared to what I'm doing now. Because this summer, my husband and I went on a group tour with the Sosa Mendez Foundation to recreate my mother's flight from Bordeaux to Lisbon. And we were able to prove by the list of countries and cities that she writes in her entry, and we passed through 90% of them. So now Monty and I are working on both the photographs that my husband and I took, the memoir that I'm writing about being in the same exact places that my mother stood in, categorically, that we know, and working with those to feather in and make one main book. That's my dream.
How close were you to your mother?
Quite close. But one would think close, and I have to live with the fact that because she passed so young at 62, that had she lived, I believe she would have opened up to me about her past, because she said absolutely nothing. And that was generational. I don't want to take it that she did not want to share with me. But we had a business together, and we spoke very, very often once I left the nest.
Yeah, and now here living in South Florida, there are so many stories, historical stories about the Holocaust and things like this. So they have to get told. They have to be written. Thank goodness we have the museums. But what I've seen, and I've interviewed some of the people who've been Holocaust victims, they have a very hard time opening up about it. And sometimes they never tell their family, but it comes out in different ways. So I would think, though, once you talk about it, it's extremely, as a psychologist, you could appreciate this,
That
Monty,
would be Monty.
that
Yep.
it's a very important thing to talk about it, because that's all inside them, just like glue.
One of the passages that today I happen to have done a speaking at one of the neighborhoods, and it comes to mind that one of my mother's lines when she was 19, she writes, "I don't remember very much about it because she was traumatized, but someday you may read about it." So it was a little prophetic,
Yeah,
knowing.
that's right. She had you in mind all the time, didn't she?
That's right.
You know what I wanted to add about the work that I've done with Rebecca and getting to know the story of her mother and Rebecca. And in that, number one, it's a dual story of Rebecca and her mother. And the name of the memoir is Walking in My Mother's Footsteps. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that it is a different kind of Holocaust story in that there were no concentration camps. It was a movement of people, her family, and thousands of others to get out of occupied countries that the Germans had conquered. So it's a story of survival and courage and finesse that Rebecca's mother had to put forward with tremendous energy. She was the leader. She was the leader of her whole family. And she was able to do this across maybe 5 or 6 countries until they finally left Europe through the port of Lisbon, Portugal.
You know, I was thinking as you were speaking, both of you, that here we have the immigrants in Syria. And all those people that are struggling, there's so much more history and stories that are going to come out over the next 20, 30 years because, you know, it's no different. When you have a family and you're struggling, it seems like there's always something there that's treacherous.
And I will add one other thing, that my husband and I were moved enough to go up to Washington, D.C. for this march, the Save Our Lives march. I am from that area. My last home was in suburban Maryland. But when I realized that these young kids, 17 and 18, are becoming the leaders, it never once left my mind knowing, okay, Ma, there are others like you who will catapult to a positive place.
Yeah, I agree. I think we all were just astonished at what's happening. Even though, you know, we wanted other things to happen, we couldn't make them happen, but the kids are doing it. And hopefully the parents of those kids are going to listen to the kids. Right. Yeah, I was very excited about this, too. Well, let me get back now to Monty. So you have finished those 3 books, and you have another book. And I know that you're raring to go with another book.
Yeah, it's actually going to be a sequel to book number 1 that will tell the story of what happens after John Mackenzie. John Mackenzie, I have an outline for it. It's called The Treatment. Because I have the books in 2 different production companies in Hollywood. Whether I ever hear from them, I don't know. I've been told to be very patient, and I am. But I call it fly fishing. I just cast it. I keep casting out, see what happens. So who knows? So the sequel will be about the son of John Mackenzie and how he potentially saves the world from all the chaos that's going to happen within the Middle East with the Iranians, with nuclear bombs, things of that nature. But we'll have to see. But I'm not going to do any further work on it until someone from Hollywood says, "Hey, we kind of like this. Let's move forward." But I'm patient.
So okay, but talking about that, does it affect your sleep at night? All this? I mean, do you sleep? Do you just put your pencil or pen down, your computer down, and can you rest, or is it always in your mind what's going on?
There's always something. It takes me a little while to fall asleep because there's, what's the sequence? What do you want to do now? I have so many things. There's a children's book that I want to get out that I have, but I just haven't had time to do it. But I think so many things are keeping me busy, like what the 3 of us were involved in, which was Night of the Writers, which occurred at the beginning of March, where we showcased about 6 different writers, and you, Anita, hosted it. And we learned about the writers and what kind of books they wrote, and it was really a celebration of authors. And in my belief is that so many authors are not recognized and not honored. And if you knew what it takes to put into writing the hours, the torment. That's only the writing part. Then comes the publishing part, which is another journey. So I said, I want to do something for some of the writers that live in our community. So got it together, and it was a wonderful evening.
Really
because,
was wonderful.
You know, a lot of people sit, just like I do a lot of symposiums for doctors, because I feel the same way in a way. They sit in their office and they help people, but nobody knows about them. And writers have the same situation. Unless you become famous like Tennessee Williams or something really big, you have your book, you have your information, and you wait, like you said. So it's good to have things that come out. You know, it's good like you did the Night of the Writers. I'm doing symposiums. And that's why I liked the radio show, because at least you don't know who's listening. You have no idea who's just saying, oh, what a wonderful, interesting thing. So as saying that, let's give some information as how they can get in touch with you. If there's a Hollywood writer out there or there's somebody, a producer, let's give that information also for Rebecca, because maybe somebody has some more information for Rebecca. So how do you think people should contact you?
Well, they can contact me. It's Monty Helfgott, Monty, and they can use my email address is the fastest way to do it, which is docmonty1, O-N-E, then the number's 203 at gmail.com, and I will get in contact with them. I would like to meet with a screenwriter, someone who's been in the business and is connected and can move this forward perhaps a little bit more. Now, I think, I'm going to put my plug in for Rebecca. I think Rebecca's story should either be a documentary or a film.
Yeah, I agree. I think it also it's going to take people in different ways, and it's going to feature this one person and what she's done. And I think I agree with you. I mean, it's not quite Schindler's List, but it has a lot of aspects to it.
It's also a mother-daughter story.
That's true.
Which is very special.
Yeah, I think so. And I wonder how many other people, sounds strange, doesn't it, Rebecca, that they're sitting with some other kinds of mementos or books, hiding in a trunk or somewhere.
Yes.
They've never opened up. They have no idea what it is. Of course, this was in a different language, so you had to go and get it, transcribed, and you had to get it. So that was even, you had no idea what that was going to be.
No idea.
Just taking that, a parallel between my books called The Silence.
Exactly.
This is the same thing. There was a silence. And for so many people, there's a silence of not knowing really what went on.
So people really should they be now writing their own autobiography? That wouldn't be a bad idea, even if it's not going to be a book. They need to share and to leave something, shouldn't they?
They absolutely should. They should just start by just write. Just start writing. Organizing it later on, that can be done. And if they can join a club like the one that I run, a Memoir Writers Club, to help them in the technique and how to focus your thoughts and how to get beyond the emotional parts of writing a memoir, that would be very important. Everyone has a story.
One of my beautiful memories, now that you mentioned that, is that when I eventually found the man, at that time he was, and we're talking 20 years ago, he was already in his 70s, who did the translation. He was profoundly grateful because his wife, who also was in her 70s at the time, wrote her Holocaust diary or memoir. And that was... stimulated him to really... That's right, to have his wife do it. So it does, one thing begats another, as they say. Yeah, well, it's always so nice to have people like you on the radio show because, we do medical. We just finished the whole thing on medical marijuana. I mean, we are a variety show. People say, what do you do? I say, it's a lifestyle. It's a variety show. We try to give people ideas because we hope that in listening, something comes up for them. Someone may, and I'm just urging them, if you have a story, and I've heard other authors say, just write 2 sentences and get started. That's right. You may not be great, but you may be very surprised at how good you are. Monty, did you always know that you were a budding author? Well,
I didn't think about novels, but I've always been writing, whether it was my dissertation or writing reports.
But this is different.
Constant kind of writing, but this is quite different. And I'm glad that I morphed into writing novels, memoirs, and that to me has been very exciting.
Right, and helping other people to do it.
And helping other people to it. That's the main thing. I tell them, this is my mission. This is
Right.
my mission.
Yeah.
His mission worked on me. Because,
Yes, and I saw it worked on other people who were
yeah,
there too.
and if he said once, he said 1,000 times, just right, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And once we untangle ourselves from thinking it needs to be perfect, you get it going, and then it has a life of its
Yes.
own.
Well, I thank you both for coming. I know that this is a very important talk for people. See, you're sitting in a studio, you never know who's
You
out
never
there
know.
listening, but there are people, because I listen to a lot of shows, and it's made a difference in my life. So thank you very much for coming.
Very welcome, Anita.